Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Mokash Kush. I'm a first-year fellow with the RPIF program. I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy. I also went to undergrad there and did a degree in industrial engineering. I worked for about 2 years at a company called Peptologics while I was in pharmacy school. That got me really interested in industry. So I decided to apply for a fellowship. And here I am with the podcast. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Tomberlin. I'm a first-year fellow here at the Rutgers Fellowship, working currently at Merck. I attended the University of Florida College of Pharmacy. And then Enid.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm a second-year fellow. I work with Nevicar, part of the RPIF program as well. I'm on the commercial side of things, and I'm in a strategic development fellowship. I attended the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and took some MBA classes with its University of Sciences, and enjoyed them, and that's really what got me interested in the industry. Ananya?
Perfect. Let me introduce myself as well. My name is Ananya. I'm a first-year Reg Affairs Fellow at AstraZeneca within the RPIF Fellowship, and I'm really excited to reach out and speak to all you students to let you know what the application process is like, and really excited to talk with these three guys. So let's get going.
Yeah, awesome. And I should probably mention, I'm a fellow at Daiichi Sankyo. That's the partner company I work with, and I'm in the commercial and business development role. So this podcast has a couple of different purposes, but one of the main purposes is we want to help pharmacy students, P2s, P3s, and P4s, who are considering going into industry or applying to a fellowship. We want to help them navigate the process. We want to help answer Q&A, commonly asked questions, and we want to give you best practice tips. So, let's start out with thinking about, why do a fellowship in the first place? What do you think, Enid? Why did you do a fellowship? You're the most senior person on the team. Why did you go in the fellowship 2 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know if I was this wise, I would say at that point. I feel like it's very important to put ourselves back in our, shoes. We've all grown so much, but really, the fellowship, the purpose of it is you're still in a learning type of position, I guess. So you get a chance to ask for new projects, working on different teams, and really expanding your learning in any way you see fit, and being challenged, in different types of roles that are necessarily more full-time, I guess. Not that a fellowship isn't full-time, but you're gonna have your goals and targets that you have to meet at the end of the year, and it doesn't really go too much apart from that. So fellowship really does let you get to wear multiple different hats, I would say.
Got it. What about you, Ananya? When you went into this fellowship application process, what were you thinking? What were your motivations?
I'll say out of all of us, I was probably the most confused about whether I should go into a fellowship in the first place. I, went through all of pharmacy school thinking I was going to do residency, like I was hardcore residency bound. But then my friend showed me about industry. I did, I had one experience in industry. I had one internship that I did and really enjoyed it. Really liked the project-based work that I did. And I would say, for me, the reason I chose to go into a fellowship was because of the intentionally designed experiences. Like, what I mean is, when you go to a job, right, like the work you do is often dictated by company needs. And of course, that is still the case in a fellowship, but you have a preceptor who's intentionally choosing, projects, opportunities for you that will help, further your career and increase your breadth of experiences. And that was like my main intention and why I decided to go for it.
So would you say your experience at your internship was like a large, I guess, fuel that got you thinking about fellowship? It was a positive experience, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Like before the one internship, I had no idea about like even like what the different functional areas were, like how to differentiate one versus another, which one was best suited for me. And so, you know, what I ended up doing in my fellowship or in my internship at Gilead was I was actually in Reg Affairs, which is where I'm in right now. But I, you know, did the, like, of course I worked on like the deliverables, the projects that we were doing, but I really also tried to connect with as many professionals in different areas of different functional areas and also different career areas, like some directors, some presidents, some like fellows, some students, interns. So just trying to talk to as many people in different areas to try to get an understanding of, you know, what role best suited my personality, my interests, and future goals.
Awesome. I definitely want to come back to that thought because I think it's interesting to think about, you know, how is a fellowship different than let's say like a 2-year internship? I think it's very different. But I think that's a common kind of belief by people who aren't too familiar with the fellowship. I'll speak about why I did a fellowship, some of the reasons why. So as I had mentioned earlier, I had worked at like a smaller, earlier stage biotechnology startup while I was in pharmacy school. And that was just like one of the greatest experiences. Super small team. Everyone on the team played a pretty large role as far as the company, just by basic math. Like we made up a larger percentage of the company. There was like 10 of us. And I really just got to see a lot of exciting and early aspects of early stage drug development, everything from like venture financing to just the hardcore preclinical studies, and to how to get people interested in your technology in the first place. So I really wanted to, that said, it was still sort of junior level associate kind of internship style. I was doing a lot, I was learning a lot, but I didn't feel like I really knew all that much about let's just say drug development beyond the scope of what I had seen at that company. And so I wanted to go into an area that exposed me to lots and lots of like really great science, specifically wanted to go into oncology, and also interested in rare disease. And I was looking at fellowships that offered those kind of opportunities, and I found business development. And one of the things about business development is you get the opportunity to just look at like hundreds and, you know, probably by the time I'm done, thousands of different studies, early stage companies, basically companies that were in a similar position as my Peptologics was when I was there, but getting to look at them from a partnering perspective or a mergers and acquisition perspective or a licensing perspective. And I found that in the Rutgers Fellowship, and it was basically everything I had been looking for. And when I started, and we'll get to this later, I found that it actually met my expectations extremely well. Like it lined up exactly with what I was looking for in reality, which was nice. But I'll get off my soapbox. Mike, why did you do a fellowship?
Well, I'm just curious for everybody else real quick. You want to hold up your hand. Like, in what year of pharmacy school did you guys know you wanted to do a fellowship? Like 1, 2, 3 PD? Okay.
4.
So I'm the same. So, okay, it's a little bit different, but I guess 3/4. There we go. Okay. So I remember it was like a year ago, it was like a 4th year doing like API rotations, and like somebody came into me and they were just like, hey, like fellowships are going to be virtual. Like they're like, I think you should check it out. And at the time, like I knew, it's not that I knew what I wanted to do, I knew what I didn't want to do. And I really wasn't connecting with the clinical rotations. I did not connect with my community rotation. Like I just knew that those were things that weren't my passion, but I also had a very curious mind. And so being from Florida, we don't really get a lot of exposure to the industry while we're in school. So it's a little bit like you have to like look around, and I luckily had some friends that were fellows, and I called them up and I was like, hey, like I don't really have any experiences in the industry, but like, do you think I have a shot at applying for this? And they were just like, absolutely. They're like, just definitely just give it a shot. And so at that point, I started doing more research and, you know, reaching out and networking. And the more I learned about industry, the more I felt like it was the right fit for me, like the combination of like, you know, business world meets science. And like, you kind of like, you're in the crossroads of everything. And it's like very like large scale. So that kind of is like how my path led me into my fellowship. I don't know if you guys have a similar experience as well.
I think that's Ananya, I think you said same, but I think that's a really good point, actually. A lot of times you know what you don't want to do. And that industry kind of reveals itself as you start to explore more and more. Um, for many people, it turns out to be the best option, and it turns out to be way more exciting than they initially thought of. And it sounds like, so I want to talk about this a little bit more, Mike. It sounds like you didn't get much exposure while you were in school, and you kind of heard about it late in the process. How did the process itself of applying and interviewing, did that kind of revalidate your interest, or what did that process do to your interest in doing a fellowship?
It was interesting. I felt like there wasn't as many resources. Like when I was initially trying to look out, I like reached out to a couple friends and they gave me some information. And then at that point, I went to Google. And I Google and you see all these cool things. You get to be on the cutting edge of science and everything. And I'm like, okay, but everything sounds cool, but what's the reality look like?
Yeah.
And once I started going through the interviews and I was actually able, at the end of the interview, you get to ask them questions. And so I was asking things I really wanted to know about. And the more I would hear from people's day to day or hear what they're working on, it got me excited. I was like, that seems like a job I would actually enjoy going into, versus at the time I was going into a hospital doing some clinical stuff that I was like killing me at the time. I don't know, Ananya or Mo, if you guys have any similar situations you went through last year.
So
I'll say,
go ahead, Ananya.
I just was curious because of what Mike said. I was wondering what resources you guys used when you were, thinking about fellowships, looking into functional areas. Like you kind of mentioned Google, but I actually spent a lot of my time on Reddit in the pharma industry subreddit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar, but I was just wondering, I feel like it's important to let people know, like, where do you look?
Yeah, we'll include that Reddit in like the in the show notes or something like that. I think that would be a great resource. But I mean, Mike, you also mentioned people. I personally think current fellows or people who went through the application process are some of the best resources you have. And unfortunately, some schools have more fellow representation than others. But if you can connect with fellows, they'll probably give you the best kind of information that's out there, and they'll give you their experiences. And that's part of the goal with this podcast, to share our experiences with people who might not know too many current fellows.
Yeah, I agree, Mo. I would also say it's just important not to network just to network. It's really just, there's a lot of great people in industry, and getting to know them for the, sole purpose of, just having a good time, getting to know somebody and sharing life experiences is really important. I got a chance to learn about the fellowship process because I was playing soccer with a 5th-year Pharm D that was applying the fellowships. And I was like, wait, that's a path? And he's like, yeah. And he told me, you get 15 free credits at my school, MBA credits. I was just fortunate enough to meet him. And I still am actually playing soccer with him tonight. And he really told me take these MBA classes. And that's really what got my interest. And until my API, rotations, I didn't have too much experience besides, just kind of keeping up with companies and whatnot. And I would say the top resource that we all have is Google and company investor reports. And it's shocking what everything is out there. If you just type in, their lead phase 3 candidate PDF and presentation and what you can find out about all these great companies and positions that you're going to be applying for. So that's the #1 resource for me.
It's so true. There's so many great resources about companies that a lot of people don't know about until they're in the industry. And I think it's great to raise awareness of those resources. Also, didn't know you were a soccer player. I'm also playing soccer tonight. But I think
see you on the field, maybe.
Yeah, I think your point about the MBA is interesting. I'm also an MBA student, partially through the Rutgers program, and this kind of falls into the categories of benefits of doing a fellowship more so than why you should do one. I wouldn't say you would do a fellowship for access to more kind of secondary degrees, but it is definitely an interesting benefit that you can go to school and kind of just learn more and more about the business side if you want to do an MBA, or maybe you want to do a public health degree. A lot of people do that. So it's great that you bring that up so people know that that's an avenue you can take.
I think I actually just quickly want to share my unique perspective. I had to restart my MBA when I entered, the program with Rutgers, and I wasn't able to transfer any credits. So no one should expect that, if they do start, if we have some students. But I've had
credit
to
transfers
say,
can be complicated for sure.
Yeah, but now the second time I'm taking these variety of MBA classes, I will say I get so much more out of them that I can apply my learnings to my day-to-day as well. When I was a student taking these classes, I did not find them as relatable.
Right, when it was just kind of purely didactic, as opposed to relevant to your daily job. So I think this kind of flows nicely into, what do you actually do as a fellow? What is the fellowship experience? One aspect of it in Enid's case is, you can be a student, but you're much more than a student as a fellow. You're also a developing professional. So, Mike, do you have any perspectives on, what you do as a fellow and what it means to be a fellow? Whether that be what's the day-to-day like, or what it's like working from home, whatever thoughts you have on this topic, I'd be interested in hearing.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things I like about being a fellow is the fact that every day is never the same. There's some days, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, where you feel like you're in meetings for 9 hours straight. And then you finish those and you got to play catch up work and spend 2 hours doing the emails. And there's other days where your schedule's open and you can spend time learning about your project or reading into your protocol or like actually understanding the science. And then the next day you go and you apply that. So I really enjoy how everything's not really routine. I think that's really good for me to stay moving. But I will say there are some downsides. There's pros and cons to working from home. Convenience. I could sit here in a suit top and sweatpants. But I think the human interaction is definitely something that I like a lot. And my company's going hybrid, and so I'm really excited to kind of have the best of both worlds. I don't know if it's the same for you guys as well.
My company is also pretty hybrid. So we try to go in 3 days a week to work and work at home the other 2 days. And I agree with you, Mike. There's definitely benefits from going to work. I'm definitely more productive when I go to work. But at the same time, sometimes it's nice to be home and get stuff done and be focused on one thing rather than going to work and you might run into folks. You might, I don't know, but I like the comforts of home as well. It's very convenient. And, when I first moved here, having furniture delivered, I'd be home and it would be fine. So definitely agree that the virtual hybrid thing is going well.
It reminds me of something we were talking about before we started recording, though, is you're all related. When you do work from home, you do have that over connectivity where I'll be sitting on the couch at 7 o'clock at night after dinner, and I'm maybe I should just check my emails real quick, or let me just make sure I know my schedule for tomorrow. And then you go on, check your schedule, and then you spend an hour or two working where you didn't even intend to. And so I think that's I guess an issue working from home. You're over connected sometimes, and you have to learn how to just separate work from home life.
Yeah.
I'll also say that. Oh, go ahead, man.
Sure. I was just gonna say it's definitely, so I'm fully virtual right now. I do have the option of going into the office, but it's not a requirement per se. And quite frankly, much of my team is staying at home, and in some cases not even in the nearby area. So we're pretty much effectively fully remote. And I don't definitely echo both of your thoughts. I feel like in some ways I'm highly productive at home and able to just do so much more because I maybe don't have a commute. Whatever the case may be, I just have basically pure and uninterrupted work time. But the problem, as Mike highlighted, is sometimes there's no clear end to your day or beginning to your day. Sometimes I wake up and go straight to my computer, and next thing I know, it's time to call it quits. Maybe it's 7 p.m. So that can be a challenge, and you definitely have to be able to draw the lines between work, home, and maybe it's school, and just living a normal, healthy, balanced life. I think Enid, your situation is a little bit different, right?
Right. I'm with a smaller company, Nevacar, so we're a little bit more, I guess, mobile. It's easier to get us, back fully in office. Working for a bigger company, you obviously have other, concerns, bigger populace, right? It makes it tougher. But we've been hybrid since I even started back in really right after peak COVID in June 2020. We were hybrid 3 out of 5 days, and now we're 4 out of 5 days. So usually Friday, people take work from home. I find it really valuable to be in office. I work on a small commercial team, so there's really a lot of cross-functional teamwork happening, and it makes it so much easier just to walk over and talk to somebody. And as somebody that has maybe more questions than a lot of the other employees, right? And then just trying to make sure I'm meeting all the objectives and goals and timelines, makes it easier to just be able to communicate. And I feel like I can actually add more value when I'm there, because I find that I get asked questions as well, and to review things a lot more often than if I was just at home. So but I really do agree with the virtual benefits. I mean, my commute is an hour, so I love my podcast that I listen to and whatnot, but I get 2 hours of productivity when I'm home. So it is a balance.
Yeah. So on one hand, Anid, you're learning. One of your roles as a fellow is to learn as much as you can, and soak up as much as you can. Sometimes it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose, because there's just so much novel science that quite frankly isn't often covered in pharmacy school, because almost by definition, the stuff the pharmaceutical industry is doing is often beyond currently approved medicines that are usually the focus of pharmacy school. So there's so much learning because of that context. But I liked how you brought up you're also a value-added member of your team. I think that's also an important aspect of fellowship, where you're not just there to learn, as you might in an internship. You're also there as a fully qualified early stage professional. I mean, Ananya, what do you think about that sort of context of being both a learner but also kind of a developing leader in the pharmaceutical industry?
I think actually I'm interested to hear all your opinions, because I think it varies from functional area to functional area, but like reg affairs especially, I'll say like it's very different from what we've learned at school, and there's like quite a bit of a learning curve. So even though we're fellows and we're fully qualified to like speak about drugs, I would say that every day I walk in and it's new acronyms. They say like day one I walked in, they were like PMDA. I was like, I don't know what that is. So you know what I mean? Like it's learning a new language. It's I would say probably differs from functional area to functional area, but a lot of days I feel a little lost, and that's okay. I've heard from my second year fellows and things like that they also feel the same way. So as long as you feel like you're contributing every day, that's
I can relate to that. Also being like a regulatory affairs fellow, that like that analogy of the drinking knowledge out of a fire hose is so true, especially in the beginning. But I think, I don't know, like separating being a leader and being a learner, I don't think that just stops at early stage of your career. Like I look at my preceptor, I look at some of the other like higher ups that have been doing this for 20 years, and it's like, I'll see them online working on Saturday and Sunday, and they're constantly learning. And so I don't think it ever does stop. I think you just learn how to get better at it. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, Mike, I was going to say something along the same lines. I think, what does that mean to become a leader? It's not like you learn how to manage people necessarily, right? It's really, I think that you get to learn how to manage work and expectations, and how to work with people to do that successfully, and to like meet your objectives, and the difference between the strategies and tactics that you're implementing, right? And why timelines are important, why goals are important, so a lot of those aspects are really of professionalism are important to learn, and in fellowship, you feel like you are really part of that team and you're deep in there, and part of a lot of learning, yeah, but really the leadership skills also comes from just the people you get to observe, and it is a lot of great people. I mean, that's one of, I will say, benefits of working in a smaller company. I have, I report directly to sometimes to the VP of marketing, but sometimes, directly report to the CCO or the C-suite, the chief commercial officer. I mean, for those that might not know, but I feel like we got to be careful with terminology. But often I feel like just witnessing how they think, how they interact with each other, and how they get things done, you realize how complex the drug world is, the industry is. So it is a lot of great work being done, and really fall in love with it in the process while you're learning. So I think it's just remarkable. Like, you become a leader through also just kind of having a lot of great role models around you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so for those who don't know the sort of fellowship structure, you spend the majority of your time, I'd say over 90%, at your partner company, working full time. You're learning leadership experientially through the role models you were just speaking about, Enid, and you're learning some of the hard and soft skills experientially as well. But it's also sort of supplemented through periodic professional development days, which the RPIF program hosts. And these are really to supplement that context, and, develop your communication skills, your leadership skills, and that's those sort of skills and traits that you look to develop throughout your career. I want to take a step back and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of pharmacy students who are currently applying to fellowships. They're looking at all the different fellowships across the country. What was that experience of applying to fellowship? Once you've decided you want to apply, what was it like? What was interviewing like? What was it like virtually? I really want to get to those kind of concepts to help some of the student listeners. So what do you think, Mike? What was the process like for you?
I think it felt like it was like almost a blur. It went so fast, but it was definitely get your CV, get that organized, learn that there's a difference between a pharmacy school CV and a fellowship application CV, especially as far as length goes and like content. Have your trusted advisors and friends review it constantly. After that, write your letter of intent, which is something that I wish I could give advice on. It's been going on for 40 years, but definitely know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then reach out to your letter of rec writers. After that, you kind of just learn how to like apply, and then, prepare for your interviews. I don't know if you guys have like Mo, did you have a different perspective when you went through it, or?
Yeah. Those are definitely the core requirements: your letter of intent, your letters of recommendation. I guess some tips, give your people who are writing you letters of recommendation, give them plenty of time to do it. Let them know as early as you find out, and, help them out. Let them know, like, hey, here's some of the experiences. If let's say they were a mentor on a project or something like that, let them know that you really felt that project was something that highlights what you want to highlight in your application, and let them take it from there. But give them guidance on why you chose them as a writer for your letter of recs, and that'll help them write the most effective letter. You really don't want someone who's writing you a generic letter. You want it personalized to your experiences and something that really highlights why you're different. Similarly, I personally think, this is just my opinion, but I think the letter of intent is one of the most powerful pieces of your applications. Your CV is important. It shows what you've done. And if you do it right, it can tell a little bit of a story as well. But really, it's your letter of intent that tells a story of who you are, aside from just the facts of what you've accomplished. What do you think are some of the core parts of the application, Ananya, or the most critical parts?
I would say definitely, I'll echo Mike and say your CV, or for me, I felt like that was what I focused most of my time on because, clinical or what pharmacy school CV might be, 5, 6 pages. It might be focused on every rotation you did and might have several bullet points that talk about, your experiences there. Whereas I really felt like for my industry CV, I focused on skills, like what are the transferable skills from each of the experiences I had, whether that's medical writing or communication or, I don't know, like presentation skills, whatever it is. I think focusing on skill set was really important for my CV. And then what else would I say is important? Okay, I'm curious to hear your experiences, but with everything going virtual, I suddenly, and I hadn't read this before in any of my, Reddit subthreads, but last year, like there was such a push to like go contact current fellows, like current first and second year fellows prior to submitting your application, just to like get to know them. And like, it was a really good experience, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on that push? Or like, did you end up going and setting up these 30-minute one-on-ones with fellows and like, did you connect with them on LinkedIn, even though you're kind of a stranger to them? Like, how did you go about it?
So I will take that one first. I will honestly just say I think that it's, that's part of the fellowship, is part of giving back, and we're all honestly, in my opinion, not obligated, but we should respect the fellowship and say, like, we should accept all of those calls. I have really had 3 to 4 calls this week. I mean, for the last 2 weeks now, and I just take them on my 5:30 commute, and talk to them 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So I think it really does help them and break that ice, and really is important. So that's just my take. I think if there's current fellows listening, that they should be taking those calls, because I do think it's kind of rude if we're not. We have to be empathetic with that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I take those requests. I also sent them out when I was applying. And, I guess one tip I would give is to try to do it in a targeted way. You really don't want to just be sending a message to every single fellow, copy and paste. You really want to do your research on what fellowships you're interested in, or even if you just think you might be interested, because it's okay not to know about exactly what you want to do. In fact, it's expected. But once you kind of get a short list, you can reach out to fellows in a very targeted way and have questions. You can do it for general networking purposes, but make sure you're using that time to get information that's going to help you with your decisions. That's the main piece of advice I would give. Take advantage of those opportunities and really use them.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could add on to that would be, if you feel like you've reached out to a fellow and you're having a conversation, you could tell it's gone really well. At the end of that conversation, ask them, like, is there anybody in your company or any other fellow you think I should talk to that'd be like helpful? And a lot of the time I was able to get connected with other people from that versus just the cold calls. Because at that point you have someone that starts vouching for you.
Yeah, definitely. And are these people, so obviously, current fellows are, one of the first people students will message, but I personally think it's okay to look for recent graduates as well to get a perspective on what is life immediately after fellowship look like. And when I say recent graduates, I mean graduates of the fellowship program. So people who are now, finished with the fellowship and in some kind of full-time role in the industry. I think those are great people to reach out to too.
I agree.
I also had just wanted to go back to the letter of intent and the CV writing question and give my take. I did interview applicants virtually, and I'll give like that perspective, and really I found a great letter of intent that got me giggling, was great, and I enjoyed that. A great CV that's polished and easy to look at, the experiences, that they just kind of are top of the page and easy to see. That's great, but I really think it all comes down to the prep, especially if you're doing virtually. I think a student should really start to prep, not for specific questions, but just experiences then and how you've learned from them and how they can apply to multiple questions. And learning about the fellowships, right, and the companies that you're going to be applying to, and just really getting to just know them because you can see a future there. And I think you're going to be able to find really your spot and what you might like better if you start aligning those things early on.
Yeah, I think.
What were you saying?
I think prep. No, I was just echoing those thoughts. I think prep work is so important. Not just thinking about what is someone going to ask me and what am I going to say if they ask me that, because the reality is they could ask you literally everything. I mean, anything. You'd be surprised at some of the questions you get. They come from all walks of life. Some of them are, related to industry specific questions, like what would you do in this scenario? Sometimes it's a clinical question, and sometimes it's completely random. I mean, I've been asked to calculate, I don't know, how many trees there are in the northeast part of the U.S. You know what I mean? They're just kind of sometimes intended to question or to test your critical thinking abilities. But I think instead of prepping for individual questions, since you really can't predict them all, just think hard about different topics and then think about how your experiences and your thoughts about those topics could apply to any series of questions. And that way, when you get a question, you can adapt the things you've already thought hard about to those questions. And I think you kind of mentioned that already, Enid.
Yeah, and I also would prioritize your API experiences and in kind of real world experiences over clubs and organizations. Even if I had plenty of leadership, experiences. Unfortunately, it's very competitive, so a lot of people do, and that comes up later. Those connections that we were both in Phi Delta Chi or something like that. That'll come up secondary, but really, I would use those first couple questions to kind of express when you've worked on teams. And everybody likes to hear about your experience on critical care or whatever it is, even if you don't have industry experiences, because we kind of live vicariously through you. We can put ourselves in your shoes. So I think you can really apply a lot of those real world learnings and how you've managed expectations and worked on teams, even if it's not industry based. And I would get that done in the first couple questions, like Mo articulated. Have your topics of a couple examples and how they fit a lot of different categories of questions. Mike,
I have a quick
Ananya?
question. Yeah, I have a quick question for you. How, as you were going through these many interviews, because, what I've heard is that, 60, 70 people at least apply to each of these positions. What qualities would you say, helped you identify candidates that stood out? Is it their enthusiasm? What stood out in some candidates?
That's a great question. I will say a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not standing out, it's weeding out. So a lot of you will question, why hasn't this person sent a thank you letter, right? Why didn't they follow up? Are they lacking enthusiasm? Are they actually interested? We're looking for somebody that's passionate for these positions, and a lot of times we're trying to just get the right candidates to our preceptors and our management to interview them. And unfortunately, it's you don't have to go crazy about, in my opinion, about kind of standing out. We still get to know you. Just worry about just being a good candidate by doing everything properly. That's my answer. I don't know if anybody has a different take.
For me, I was in this weird position where I was applying, but I felt like I was late to the party where I didn't have any industry experience. There wasn't really happy opportunities at my college. And so me and my friends that did apply, we had to ask ourselves okay, how am I going to get my foot in the door? And then once I'm in the door, how am I going to stay recognized? And so a lot of us, we did talk about, when I practiced, we would talk about our happy situations, but they would also talk about things that were unique to our College of Pharmacy that we accomplished. I think, I don't know, it was we were talking about not preparing for certain questions, but preparing for me, I look at them as almost stories, what you did. And this is I've told some people this before, but it's really cheesy, but one of the benefits of it being virtual, I used to write down on a piece of paper my 10 big stories, and I'd put that right behind my computer. And if someone ever like took me off guard in an interview, I would just like glance over and like, oh my God, that completely applies to this. And then start telling that question as well.
And you can do that with company information as well. I mean,
Exactly.
definitely don't read off a script.
Yeah.
But you can use notes, right?
Yeah.
Because
know who's interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yep. And I will say that applies to the interviewers as well. We can pull up your letter of intent. We can pull up everything. So it gives us a little bit more of an advantage in kind of getting to know you. So the virtual aspect, in my opinion, isn't that big of a barrier to that personal connection, because there's plenty of advantages to it too.
Sure. And I mean, ultimately it's, an even grounds. I mean, everyone is applying virtually. So really just make the most of it. I mean, think about strategies for interviewing during your rotations. Talk to your preceptors ahead of time. Let them know like, hey, I'm interviewing. Can I maybe take a half day or make up the hours later? Or think about when you want to schedule your interviews, because you will have a lot, and you'll be on a computer interviewing for half an hour. Some days you might have 4 interviews. I've seen people who have had a ton of interviews on single days. Communicate all of that stuff with your preceptors if you're on rotation, so that you don't really, one of the disadvantages, you might be going from rounds in a hospital to 30 seconds later prepping for an interview that starts in a couple minutes. That's less ideal, I would say, than being able to sit down and kind of calm yourself down and prep for the interview.
That, you're going to be nervous the whole time that you're about to have an interview. So you're rushed, you're nervous. Yeah. You're not going to come
plan
across
it out.
genuine.
Yeah.
Can I quickly interject here? I was on Pacific Coast time. I don't know if all of you, because I used to live in Seattle, right? So these interviews with these East Coast companies, sometimes would be at 6 in the morning for me. That sounds ridiculous, but it happens because their availability is 9 to 5 or whatever, right? So I would just say prepare ahead of time. And some things I did to help with the interview prep, and I'm sure this is not just for a reg standpoint, but I really looked up industry news and regulatory specific topics, just so that, if I had time to ask them questions, if I had rather than memorizing, I would say the portfolio of drugs that they had, I tried to focus on a couple drugs, but I think for me, I really tried to get an overall glance of what's going on in the news so that I could be versed on that in case they asked me anything about the news, or in case I had questions on how it related with their portfolio, right? So, yeah.
Ananya, do you currently work on multiple drugs or 1 or 2?
That's a great question. I actually work on multiple, and part of that is, and granted, I started 3 months ago, so a lot of this is shadowing other people. Right. But one of the aspects, this might be something, I can bounce to you guys again, but one of the aspects I looked for when looking for fellowships was the opportunity to have a breadth of experience. And in reg, that was early plus late stage development, US versus global, also small molecule drugs versus biologics. So the breadth of experience that the fellowship offers was something that I really considered, as well as how many co-fellows are there, where is it located, all of those things, But what did you guys consider when you were sorting through these various fellowships?
So similar to
Mo, please go.
Yeah, I was going to say similar to you. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I really did have essentially specific criteria that I really needed to get out of a fellowship in order to go for one. And so one of the things I did during my interviews was make sure, by asking the interviewers questions themselves, was asking them specific questions for things that I needed to know in order to know that this is something I want to do for 2 years. So I would just say, if you know what you want to do or know what experiences you're looking to get, if you're Ananya and want a breadth of experiences, ask, am I going to get an opportunity to work on small molecules and biologics? Or am I going to be working on one drug for 2 years? And maybe you want to work on one drug for 2 years, and you just want to go into super detail about that one drug so that you can learn every aspect about it. Or you can learn a little bit about a lot of different drugs. So there's different things that someone might conceivably want to get out of a fellowship. but they might not know that based on the brochure alone or the website alone. So ask people those questions. That way you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I was gonna say similarly, you know, asking questions is vital. It's, I think, asking about what you will be working on, and not just what am I going to be working on, but more specifically like biologics or, you know, small molecules. I think that shows that a bit of awareness around what you would be working on and about the position and company. But you can you can kind of boil it down a lot of times what pipeline agent you'll be looking at or working on. If you're, you know, going for marketing oncology, well, you should look at the phase 3, almost ready to launch assets, right? Or if you're going to be working in clinical development, we'll look at, you know, what falls under. Or I think a lot of times you can give a very educated guess at what that team you're applying for is working on, and really come prepared and surprise them because you just saw the recent PDF or whatnot. You know, I think that was a huge advantage for me personally when I was applying. I was surprised when the company was surprised, because I thought, you know, that's just everybody's gonna bring that knowledge to the interview. But asking questions about your position is vital. I think that's a great takeaway from what you were saying.
Thank you. Does anyone have any last tips you want to give about applications specifically? I do want to get to rapid fire student FAQs. So we did collect some frequently asked questions from current students, and we'd like to get through those rapid fire. But I'm curious, before we get there, if anyone had any tips for applying. Any last messages on that front?
The only big one I would give, if you're someone that's going in without an industry rotation, your first page of your CV should be industry related experience. That should be your first tab.
Yep.
And look at what you've done in your rotations, and I guarantee you there's a way to spin it into being it's something relevant to the industry that you could talk about. So I would just kind of like leave it, like, don't be all down on yourself and look at it in a creative approach.
Absolutely. I mean, I was definitely on some clinical rotations, and I knew I wanted to go into industry. So, you know, while I was doing all the requirements for that clinical rotation, I was also thinking to myself, hey, what studies are you running at this university? It was a university academic center. Are you running any studies for pharma drugs? You know, and my preceptor told me about some of the studies they were running. So you can take opportunities that might not sound like industry and try to find how it relates to industry. And of course, the same analogy could be applied to retail or specialty pharma, et cetera. Ananya, did you have any last tips?
I would say my biggest tip is to stay organized. You're probably going to apply to many companies. And so keeping track of which interview you're on, what date that's on, what time zone that's on, which letter of intent you've written, like what company that's for. Like, this sounds really dumb, but when you have 20 and like you're trying to send the right one to the right place, to the right fellow, like, or to the right program, like it gets confusing. So stay as organized as possible. And then this sounds like a really weird tip, but for me, I organize my outfits by the level of interview I was in. So then all of my first rounds are in like the blue outfit, all of my second rounds are in the red one, all of my third rounds are in the yellow one. Like, that sounds dumb, but there's no way I was going to remember what I wore in the middle of October, sometime in December, like, to not repeat them. And maybe some of you have the same problems as me.
I think as a guy, we just changed. I wore the same suit, just changed ties.
Yeah, I cannot say the same thing applied to me, but, you know, to each their own. And I think that's awesome. So, you know, interestingly, we actually did cover a lot of these FAQs already. I'll try to find one we didn't. So rapid fire, how many fellowships should someone apply to without becoming overwhelmed? Ananya, you want to take that one?
I think you should apply to as many you would be willing to go to. Like, that sounds like an open-ended question, but don't apply to any that you are like, oh, like this has way too many rotations, I don't want to do. If you don't want to do it, why are you spending the time and effort applying? Like, for me, I was someone that appreciates like covering my bases. So I did go through every single fellowship, like sort out my top 5, like my middle 5, my bottom 5, you know, and applied to those. And for me, that ended up, the number that I magically had was 22. That sounds ridiculous. Some people, I know one of my friends applied to like 7. So, you know, take that as you will. But I think that there's no one number that suits everyone. It's for your comfort. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's going to be way too many interviews.
Yeah.
But
I think that's a perfect answer. I think giving it a number is probably not appropriate. And I think it really does come down to, do you actually like this fellowship, or you know, why are you applying? And if it's a good reason, apply to it. So I'll take this one. You know, I'll pass this one off because I don't know. Actually, I will take this. So what are the best resources to learn more about fellowships in the different functional areas? Please chip in if I missed one. Ananya mentioned Reddit. There's Twitter. But the one I think we should mention is the RPIF website, is where a lot of the crucial information is. So please check out the RPIF website. Of course, we'll link that in the show notes too. And then again, you know, current fellows, recent graduates of the fellowship program, great resources. Any other?
I think there's 2 major other ones that I used.
Yeah.
One was like, there's a website called, I think it's like A27. I don't know if you guys use that, but that was really good. I can probably send you a link if you want to attach that one. And
I do remember that A27 website. Some of the most down to earth.
Yeah, it was also funny.
Yeah, tells it like it is. Great website for thinking about fellowships. So what are receptions and how important are they in the application process? Do you know anything about receptions, Enid?
Yeah, I mean, I think virtually it's going to be a little different with receptions, but equally as important. Again, I think don't try too hard to stand out. Just be polite and send your thank yous. Really, I think receptions, everything, just show that you're accountable, right? Use those events to show accountability. How would you act if you were hired already?
Right. Great networking opportunity, those receptions. So Ananya, can you talk about teaching requirements? What are, I don't know if I'd call them requirements, but what are the teaching opportunities given at the fellowship?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the university-tied fellowships, such as RPIF, they have opportunities for fellows to teach some classes at the pharmacy school. So I know that at Rutgers, we have the opportunity to teach some of the like skills labs, for example, therapeutics labs. I know that there's like a leadership course that some fellows are teaching. There's also a teaching and learning certificate where you can just learn some basic skills. It's like a rigorous, 2-day or 3-day. I think that's what it is for DC fellows. I'm not sure what it is if you're in New Jersey, but basically there's some sort of teaching and learning certificate where you can learn some basic aspects of teaching, grading, like developing questions, that sort of thing. So cool opportunity if you're interested.
Yeah, definitely cool. You are a when you get hired as a fellow, your sort of formal title at Rutgers is adjunct clinical faculty. So you have your job, but you're also faculty at Rutgers. And teaching is one of the ways you fulfill that Rutgers component of the fellowship. So we did talk about dual degrees already. Hopefully everyone knows that you do have the opportunity to pursue secondary education. What about vacation time? I mean, I think I can take this one. You do get vacation time. I think certain rules might vary from company to company, but granted, every fellow gets vacation time, just like anyone at any other job does.
It's pretty generous.
What's that?
It's pretty generous.
Yeah, it is generous, and use it wisely. I honestly, we covered all the frequently asked questions I've heard. Did we miss any that you guys have heard from, people messaging you on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be? Any other common student questions that you'd like to answer kind of publicly here?
Not really. Just take advantage of all the opportunities, like speak to fellows when you can. I think my final say in all of this is that, like, we know it's a super stressful time, right? Like, we also went through that super stressful time. And to me, the way I got through it was like organizing everything and then like having tasks that are like one day at a time. Like today, all I'm going to do is open my resume and like create like my first draft. Tomorrow, I'm going to send it to someone. Like, break it down into really small chunks, because otherwise it can be easily, like, you can get easily overwhelmed. So, I mean, break it up and you'll feel better about it.
Yeah, great advice. It takes, I don't know if people realize, but it takes quite some time. I mean, from the time you start to the time you get that offer is several months, if you count find. So it's definitely a journey. And I think that's great advice. Take it one day at a time, because, you know, if you make it to that third round interview, you're going to be stressed. I mean, it's tough. But, you know, you prepare yourself and you take it one day at a time, and you'll get there. Any last thoughts, Mike or Enid?
I think, like, just going off what you were saying, like being organized, I think a big thing going through this process with your nerves is being genuine, trying to go in as relaxed as possible or composed. Because at the end of the day, like, you're looking to showcase like your personality and your enthusiasm or passion for what you're applying for. And if you get too caught up being stressed out, you might not show that. So I think it just practice might be like helpful. So just trying to stay as cool and calm as possible.
Definitely.
My biggest advice, show accountability through sending thank yous if I haven't articulated that point already a couple of times. And then
Make me feel like a bad
show
applicant.
interest through asking a lot of good questions. I think those are two important things.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for this episode. Look out for episode 2. And, you know, thanks for listening. We'll be back with more episodes, and we'll have interesting guests we'll interview, including current fellows, alumni, people throughout the pharmaceutical industry, and hopefully it's helpful to you students out there or anyone who might be listening.
The RPIF After Hours podcast wants to add a disclaimer that the views, information, and opinions shared on this podcast are solely those of the individuals and/or guests involved, and not of Rutgers, the Rutgers Pharmaceutical Industry Program, or partner companies. Additionally, the views, information, and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests by no means represent absolute facts and are subject to change at any time. Thank you.